In this section of the tutorial, we're going to cover the data aspect of UserEngage. So basic elements such as how user tracking works, what kind of information you can see in the user profile, or how to assign people to different companies. Alright, so let's start with the basics. So what kind of information do we have about our users? Right now I'm in Data, People section of the application, and I'm able to enter user profile. So this is a user profile. The basic elements of the user profile include their image, which is not available in this case. I can see the name and surname of this user, which is quite weird right now. I can see the list that this user belongs to, so for example newsletter lists or others. Segments, so such as new users with email. Tags, I can tag a user and give a tag such as VIP user. And deals, which are basically CRM elements. On the right, I can see a list of my user attributes. Each user attribute has this tooltip which tells you what kind of data is inside the tooltip. You already know what user ID is from our previous tutorial. The email is obvious, then page views. UserEngage automatically counts the number of page views of each user. Then IP address, the URL on which the user currently is, the country from which the user is based on the IP address. The key is an identifier of the cookie. Browser language, version, OS type, enable notifications helps you select from which users do you want to receive notifications about messages, because some users might be blacklisted because they're bots or just spamming. Unsubscribe from emails is false. I am subscribed to emails. Score, my score is 0. Score is a numerical value regarding to the possibility of buying a product, which in this case is equal to 0 because I'm a new user and I haven't been assigned any points yet. The host name, the email validation, the user status. So I'm a user because I already have an email address provided. If I didn't have the email, I'll be a visitor. Then my gender is unknown, device, and first and last. Those are quite important attributes. I do not have any mobile devices registered yet. So this is it when it comes to basic user attributes. Of course, you can have other custom user attributes. You can assign different custom attributes such as company name or the role inside the company that the person has. If you want to update or delete a user, just click here. So you can here update user, so change the attributes of the user, delete the user, update their avatar, or update timeline and see automations. Those two elements are a bit complicated. I will talk about them later in the tutorial. Now in the middle, I can assign notes to this user. So let's say I can say this is a very engaged user. The note is visible right here for other agents to see. It will also be visible in the chat section, but I will cover that later. So the next thing is I can assign new activities in CRM to this user. I can send a chat message or go to chat conversations with this user inside the app. I can send an email or send a push notification on a mobile device. Below I can see the timeline of the user. So those are all the different things that happened between the company and the user. Of course, I have the page views because our widget is working and it automatically logs all those page views. I have events such as checkout. This one is a purchase event because I have just purchased something on the website. And I have a note, but there's a lot more that can be stored here. Other elements include activity in the CRM, deals in the CRM, different interactions with email campaigns, data about filling out forms, the pop-up forms of course, IMAP, so the connection with the inbox of an agent. If you have IMAP enabled, then the incoming messages from this user to your inbox will be displayed here. In-app messages, meaning mobile messages. Those are simple chat conversations. Mobile screen views are also like page views but on mobile. Notes, as you've seen before. Page views, phone calls, product events. Product events are different type of events that regard to e-commerce transactions or e-commerce operations, but I will cover that later. Push notifications, delivery of SMS, scheduled phone calls, and web push delivery. So there's so many different filter elements that you can enable. Of course, your filters will look a little bit different because they're not yet finished in this beta version. You'll be able to select checkboxes for which elements of the timeline you want to see. Now let's move back to the people section. So this is the list of my users, my visitors. As you can see, they're being ordered by the last seen value. So the people who've just visited your website a few minutes ago are on the top, and the old visitors are down at the bottom. This section shows me all the people in my application, but I might want to see only some part of them. In order to do that, I can select filters. So for example, I only want to see people who have email that has any value. Now I can search, and UserEngage will return users with an email address. I can also create more complex queries. For example, I can select people who have an email address or their first seen attribute has any value. So search. And now of course I see both the people who have something in first seen and people who provided their email address. So a lot more users. I can use two operators, so or and AND. AND means that all the attributes listed here have to be true, and OR means that at least one of them has to be true. I can select different AND and OR operators on those attributes. So for example, I might want to say that not this first seen has any value, but first seen is less than 5 days ago, and as you can see, here's the AND operator, and is more than X minutes ago, more than 10 minutes ago. Let's see. So those are people who have visited the page for the first time less than 5 days ago and more than 10 minutes ago. Now I will make it a bit more complicated by also adding a rule on email that needs to have some value. Right, let's search. So now I see people who have first visited the page less than 5 days ago, more than 10 minutes ago, and have an email address. As you can see, it's all true. Now let's clear the filters and search by events. So I want to find all the people who have added something to their cart. So the first occurrence of the event add to cart has any value. Of course, if you don't have those kind of events implemented on your website inside the code yet, you will not see them right here. This element of the implementation has been covered in the previous tutorials. So, first occurrence of add to cart event has any value. Let's search. And there's this user who performed this event. Let's move on. Now, companies. Each user might be assigned to a company, and each company might have different attributes. So when searching by company attributes, basically I'm saying show me all the people assigned to companies that have those kind of attributes. Of course, that might work in cooperation with other attributes that regard to the user. Now, deals. So show me all the people who, for example, have more than one deal. So deal count greater than 1. So those are people that have at least 2 deals in CRM. And there are other attributes regarding deals, but we'll cover those later. Activities, those are also related to CRM. And products. So in case of e-commerce, as I said, you don't use standard events, you use product events. And my add to cart event here is a product attribute add to cart. So I will now clear the filters and once again search for people who added the cart, but this time I'm looking for people who performed the product event, not the standard event. So the first occurrence has any value. Search. Alright, I have 3 users. Let's enter the user profile. And as you can see, there's this event in the timeline, so this is why he came up. And the last thing is a segment. So let's see. For example, I might want to create a segment of users who have ever added anything to cart. Alright, so those are those 3 users. Instead of searching for them every time I visit the app, I might just add them as a segment. So I'll call them added something to cart. Those users have added at least one product to cart. It will be visible to all agents. Now I save, refresh, and let's see. This segment now appears right here. When I click on it, those people appear. The great thing about this is that this is being calculated each time I refresh the page. So if I now created a new incognito page, I'm now on the page, I refresh, so there's a new user because I'm using incognito mode, so the system does not recognize me. So if this user now adds something to cart, and I go to my segment, as you can see, this user is automatically here. So this view is being generated each time I visit it with the newest data. I can also change and update my segments by simply editing them right here and clicking on Update Segment. As I said, there are different types of data that you can include in UserEngage, and people is just one of them. The second one is companies. As you can see, I do not yet have any company here, so I can add a company manually. My company will be called example company. I do not have to assign the ID of this company. I will leave all the other fields empty because they're self-explanatory. I can save this company right now, refresh the page, and the company is here. When entering a user profile, you'll see that the company profile is very similar to the user profile. It also has those attributes, key elements, segments, and deals, and the timeline of the company. So what is a timeline of the company? This will include deals, activities, and nodes that people assign to those companies. Because now I can add an employee to the company. Let's see, I might add Lech test 1, 2, 3. Save. And the user is right here. When I go to the user profile, I can see that he's assigned to the example company. I've mentioned those standard attributes and custom events and their attributes, but I haven't showed you how to manage those. Basically, you have to go to Settings, Main Settings, then User and Data Events, Client Attributes. Here you can include custom user attributes, such as role and company, which will be a string, date, integer, boolean, date and time, or fixed choice. Let's go through those options and see what are they used for. So boolean is basically a true or false value, such as is the CEO. Integer is a numerical value, such as the number of page views. Date includes just the day in the history, so for example, date of birth. String is a text element, such as role in the company. Date and time might be something like the date of first visit. And fixed choice, I can select a custom attribute, lead quality, and select 3 options like 1, 2, or 3. So that will be a fixed choice. In this case, I will go with a string. Always remember to include the description. So I will go, this is an attribute that tells us what is the role of the user inside the company. It is great to also add description of how this attribute is being collected and where it should be used. So when I save it, I can see that the attribute is already here. Now I can go to the user profile, click on Update User, and among all the attributes of this user at the bottom, I will see role in the company that now can be selected. For example, I'll go with CEO. Let's save. And as you can see, it now appears in the list of attributes. You can of course also see the same for a company. So a company has standard attributes, but it can also have custom attributes. And similarly, I have to go to main settings, but this time open the company section and company attributes. And the rest is exactly the same. Another thing that you might want to do at the beginning of using the system is importing your users or companies. In order to do that, you just go to Settings and Importers. Now, I want to first import users. There are two options to do that. The first one is importing those users with a CSV file or by simply pasting data. So first, let's cover the import via a CSV file. You can download an example file of how it should look like right here or here. Let's take a look at it. It looks like this. So it's very simple. It's important that the first row needs to include the attributes. Of course, you don't need to include all those attributes. It's just in the example. You need to very carefully analyze if the value that you provide is exactly the right type. As you've seen before, there are different types of attributes, the string, integer, boolean, and so on. So gender and status are boolean, so they are equal either 1 or 2. Email is email. The first and last name are strings, so those are strings, and so on. If you want to import your own users, the best practice is to open an empty spreadsheet and simply copy the attributes in columns that you want to use. So the first one, for example, first name and email and last name. So those are the attributes that I want to provide for my user. Now I will call my user johndoe.com and another user Lisa Smith, Lisa@smith.com. Right. So I just want to import those two users. What I need to do is when you're in Docs, you can just simply click File and download as a CSV file, and it's very important to use this format. Other formats will not work. Alright, I can click it, download, go here and paste this data. Now, I am also able to assign different tags to those users on the list. For example, import first. I can also assign them to different marketing lists, but I do not have any list yet. I would have to create a new one here. Now the separator of this document is a comma, and encoding is UTF-8, and this one is the most commonly used. Now I click import. As you can see, the system has detected the column headers in my document. Because I have provided perfectly the same column headers as there are attributes in the database, it automatically paired them and suggested to connect them. So basically it says this header of a column should include data for this user attribute and this one for this one. So if you include those identical ones, as I said, it's the best practice, then the system will automatically suggest those. However, if I included, for example, a header such as company name 123123, then I would have to add it manually. So I'll have to select it and then select the attribute to which this data will be proceeded. So now I can click import and let's see. My first import is here. I can see that there are two people in the import. 2 succeeded, 0 failed, and the operation has finished. Right, let's see the people section. I can close that already. And let's see. As you can see, those people have been added to my database perfectly. Now we can move on to importing users by pasting your data. So now here I have to simply select some part of this database, copy it and paste it. I will change the data, so I will go with first name 123 just to show you how it works. Email, okay, I will leave it like this. Email 123. And now change the names. Johnny. The email has to be different, otherwise the user that already existed will be updated. If there are several users with the same email in the database, the user will choose the oldest user and update that user with the data that you provide. If there is a user that already has this email address but has more attributes than I provided here, they will not be changed to 0 or nothing. They will stay with the same values as before. Alright, and the same with Lisa, Lisa123, Lisa123, and Smith123. Alright, all I have to do is select this space, copy it, go to import, paste your data, paste it. Now, when it comes to tags, I will go with import second, now list, and now as you can see, the separator is not comma, it's a tab, because it separates different columns. Right, let's go import. And as you can see, this time the system has not matched those attributes automatically. I need to do it manually, so I go header first name 123 will be sent to first name, add. Alright, the next one, email 123 will be sent to email. Great. And last name will be sent to, where is it? Last name. Add, import, and let's see, it succeeded. And in the people section, they are right here. So everything worked just fine. One thing that is important to remember when using paste your data is that you cannot include, for example, empty columns. And it's not very good to include empty rows. This might cause the system to not import the users correctly. So bear in mind always to include headers and always to include some data. It's no problem if one row doesn't have some data. Something like that is not a problem. But this is a problem if I send it like this. If I send it like this, there is no problem. Right, let's move on. Now let's move on to importing companies. The entire process is practically identical. The only thing is that you do not have to provide an email address of a company, you just have to provide its name. As you can see, the tags and separator and encoding is exactly the same. You can also paste your data here, and the entire process is basically the same, so I will not cover the full process. You can also import your events. If you have another tracking system or some history of purchases in your database somewhere, you can create an Excel file including events from your users. So for example, if you have an e-commerce, you have a list of people who bought something from you along with their email addresses and dates or exact times of the purchase. So you can simply download the CSV file and adjust your history of events or purchases to this layout of events. Then after uploading your users or your customers, you'll be also able to import their purchases or other interactions with your company. Now, once we've imported all the users, it might be a good time to cover exporting users. So, how do you export users? Now I'm in my people section. I can scroll down and up. So those are the users that I have just imported. Now what I can do is simply select those 4 people, go to manage and export users. In this case, when I select checkboxes of some part of the users and click export users, I will only export those that are currently checked. However, if I turn off all the checkboxes and click manage export again, I will export all the users that are currently visible in my people section. So if I filter here by email, has any value, and search, now I have 8 people right here. When I go manage export, I will export all of them. Let's see how the export looks like. I've been redirected to the main settings section, And as you can see, this is the export with a CSV file that I've generated. Let's click on it and see what's inside. So this is the table. It has all the user attributes and all the values for each attribute. Pretty simple.